So thank you for that. So welcome. So this is a session, like I said, about pivot tables, intermediate level, and I'm going to show you a few things. My name is Margaret Boukadia, and I actually give Excel lessons. So if it's something you're interested in, you can contact me after this session. So today, for pivot tables, we're going to cover the different ways you can aggregate or summarize values in pivot tables. We're also going to look at how to calculate percentages using the pivot table so that it's within the pivot table itself. You don't have to do it manually. We'll also learn how to create a new field in a pivot table. Rather than creating it in the data, you do it in the actual pivot table itself. So it's a calculated field. And then we'll do some pivot charts. And then I will show you how to create a slicer that is connected to a pivot table, and then how to create a slicer that connects all of the pivot tables. So whenever you create something in a slicer, all the pivot tables change. Okay, so before we start, I just want to talk about what a pivot table is. So a pivot table is basically a way that you summarize information. So you summarize data so that you're actually able to get some information from it. So for example, when you look at this is sales data. And this sales data is by retailer. We have the sales date, region, state, city. And then if you go to the far right, it tells us the number of units that were sold. So this is like units that were sold in the sports shop all across America. So it tells us number of units sold, the price per unit, the total sales, like what the revenue was, and the margin. But when you look at it like this, row by row, you can't tell straight away like which retailer did the best. Or you can't see straight away what was the total number of units sold. You need to be able to summarize it. So pivot tables are great because it allows you to summarize it very quickly. Okay, so that's the advantage of a pivot table. You can summarize information quickly in a very dynamic way, and you can identify trends. What I like to advise when you're doing a pivot table is with your data, convert your data into an Excel table. And the reason why I say this is that whenever you do a pivot table, if you need to update any information, like need to add more data, the pivot table will be linked. So you wouldn't have to change the data source, it will just be connected. The pivot table will just update with the new data. And to do that, you click anywhere in the data, you go to insert, and then normally you would click on the table, but this is already a table, that's why it's not highlighted. So you just select table and it would convert all the data into a table. Okay, so let's start off with the first thing, with the pivot tables. Okay, so we're going to summarize our data, and we're going to first start off with the most typical pivot table that we create, which is calculating the totals. So I've got 3 questions here. We won't go through all of it. What I would do, I'll go through some of the questions and I'll deliberately leave some spare, I'll deliberately leave some exercises blank so that in your own time, when I do email you the spreadsheet after the session, you can then recreate a pivot table yourself. So the very first one is total number of units, quantities sold by retailer. So to create a pivot table, there are 2 ways of doing it. But as you said, you've used pivot tables before. So because we want to do it in this sheet here, I'm going to click, I want this pivot table to be right here. Let me copy. I'm going to create a pivot table right here. So I would go in the insert menu, pivot table. Now you notice that this has been populated, but this is blank. So this is the table or range. That means where is the data? So I click on this arrow, and then I go to the data itself, highlight, I return it to the dialog box, and now it's filled out. Our table, Excel table, is called table 1. That's why it says table 1, so the address. And then where do you want to put the pivot table? We've selected existing worksheet, and it's got the location. It's in the sheet called free aggregating data, cell B13. That's where I actually started from. That's where I want it to be. And then I say okay. And here we go. So now we have our first pivot table. Okay, so we want to do the total number of units. The total number of units. So units sold, we'll put it in the row because we want to see it. Sorry, total number of units, we'll put that in the values because we want to see the total. So that's the sum of that. And we want it by retailer. So we'll put the retailer in the rows. Here we go. So that's a total number of units sold by retailer. So this is the most common pivot table that one would create, is calculating the totals by different categories. These numbers are not very clear, so I tend to do a very quick format. So I'm going to highlight it, go to home, because I want to be able to space it out so that you can see the numbers, 1,000 or 19,000. I'm going to click on the comma. You see it spaced it out. So now you can see the number much clearer. So you can now see it's 197,000. But I don't need the decimal places. So I'm going to remove the decimal places. There we go. So that's our first exercise. Was that clear?
Yeah, everything is normal. It's
Yeah, so
easy.
this is something you've
It's
done
easy
before.
way.
Yeah, this is the straightforward one. So now that's the total, and that's what everyone does. But sometimes you may not want to know the sum of number of units. You might want to know the average number of units. Okay, so that's what we're going to do now. Work out the average number of units. Yeah. So to work out the average number of units sold by retailer, how would you do it?
Say again, please.
How do you think we would calculate the average number of units sold?
Uh,
I'm going to copy and paste this pivot table here so that we can. Have you done that before where you've calculated the average?
yeah, I think so. Yeah. Same thing,
Okay.
and with the right bottom, you have to paste it
Yeah,
again. Right bottom, on the
right,
mouse.
bottom,
Yeah,
yes.
the
Okay,
mouse.
so I put the retailer in the rows, yes,
Yeah,
and then the units sold in the values. And then how would I change that so that instead of it saying a sum, how would I change it to be
yeah.
average?
Just click it on sum of units sold.
Yes, that's right. So we click on the arrow there, and then we select
Value
that.
field settings. Yes, yeah.
Yes, good. And so in here, you've got the different ways of summarizing the numbers. So you can summarize it by sum, or you can just count the number of times or average, or you can tell you the maximum or the minimum. So we select average, and that's it. So we have the average. So now the next one is average number of units sold by retailer and gender. I will do this example. Okay, so I'm going to copy this pivot table along rather than do it from scratch because you already know how to do a pivot table. So and paste. Okay, so now in this example here, we would like it by average number of units sold by retailer. So we have the retailer and gender. So in this example here, we want to see the gender. So we can actually put the gender in the columns. So now we can see by retailer and it's split by the gender. So men in this column, women, and then the grand total. And that's clear. You also have the option of putting it in the filter. So rather than putting gender type in the columns, you can put the gender type in the filter. And then when you want to, you just select which one. So this is if you don't want to put too much information, you wanted to filter out the information. That's when you use the filter. Otherwise, you want to see both, you put it in the columns. Okay, so that's the most common ways of aggregating data. So you can do it by sums, averages, and then you can also use the filter and the columns. So now we're going to look at calculating percentages. So we've calculated here the number of units sold, but sometimes you might want to see what was the percentage sold for each one of them. So what you find a lot of people sometimes do sometimes people end up doing it manually. So they would work out the percentage, they would put down equal, and they would times this amount, you know, by this particular cell, C9, and they'll divide it by the total in here, C15. And sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't. So I normally advise, don't do it manually, don't put the percentage inside. What you can do is actually calculate the number inside here, like in the pivot table itself. Okay, so let's do that now. I copy that pivot table and put it along here, so you can actually see that it will do it for you. So I've got sum of units sold. I'm going to place it again. So you can actually put the same field twice, as you've seen, sum of units sold, and I put the sum of unit again. I clicked on it and dragged it to the values. And it's this second one, I'm going to turn it, instead of it just being a number here, I'm going to turn it into percentages. So click on the arrow on the side, click on field, value field setting, and it's on sum, which is good, and then show value adds. Right now it says no calculation, but we want it to be a calculation. So we select the arrow and we say we want it to be a percentage of the column total. Yes, this is the total of the column. So of the column total. And then I just want to change the name of the field because at the moment it's called sum of units sold 2. So I'm going to say percentage of units sold. So there we go. So now we've got our percentages. And this way is much better to do. You see the percentages are the same, 8%, 8%, 24, 24, 12, 12. And I favor this way more, reason being, because if you decided, actually, I want this pivot table here to be split by, you might say, I want it to be split by gender. As soon as you change it, it's going to mess up the pivot table. So for example, if I put, what is it, the gender into the filter here. If I, sorry. So not the gender. So as soon as you like make some changes, like if you were to place it, for example, in the rows, you don't have the changes here. There's like, you can't see the percentages underneath. Whereas in this pivot table, because you've calculated the percentages inside, now, if you put the gender inside, you see how the percentages will just calculate. If I put the gender now into the rows, can you see, I can see the percentages in each section. Whereas on this side, it was just blank. So that's why I normally advise to do the percentages within the pivot table. Yeah, is that clear?
Yeah, everything is okay.
Yeah. Have you done percentages before?
Yeah, many times.
Many times, okay. Okay. Have you created calculated field before? Now we're going to do
Calculate what?
a calculated field. So basically, for example, we look at our data and it doesn't actually tell us the profit. There's no column that has profit. So rather than going in here and calculating the profit, what we're going to do is actually create a new field called profit within the pivot table. So we're not going to add a field here. We're going to add it in the pivot table itself. So that's what we're going to do.
I'm not sure. I haven't seen
If
it.
you understand. Yes, so we're going to do it now. So this is quite a very useful one because it's also quite dynamic when you do it within the data. So we're going to calculate the profit. So because we can get sales, but we can't get the actual profits. So the way to calculate the profits, the field that you need to do is the total sales times the operating margin. I'll just show you the data. So basically the total sales here, then we need to multiply it by this column. Yeah, so the total sales times the operating margin. So that's what we're going to calculate now. So we're going to create a pivot table again. I'm going to copy and paste the existing one. Okay, and we want to We're going to remove the sum of units because we don't need that. What we want is a field called profit. So click on pivot table. So in the menu above, you click on the pivot table analyze, and you'll notice there's a section here called calculations. So you select field items as set, and here you go, you've got calculated field. So we're going to create a new field and we're going to call that profit. I'll put it in capital letters. And then it's asking what's the formula for this. So like I said, the formula is the total sales. So click on total sales, insert field, and then we'll select multiply on our keyboard. So that's the asterisk or times, and then multiply times something. Times by the operating margin. So click on the operating margin, insert field. So that's our formula. The name of the new field is called profit, and the formula is total sales times operating margin. So it will take the numbers from the field total sales and it'll multiply it by the field called operating margin. And we click on add. So now we have a new field, then we say okay. So now what you'll notice, the pivot table has put the profit that the one that we just created, is created it straight away. Can you see? Sum of profit. And when you go to these fields here, you'll notice the new field that we've created called profit is there at the bottom. And it's dynamic. You can just change things now. So like for the rows, we can put the rows up there and we can see it by region. So we can see the profit by region as well. So you can just do it as normal. So you can work out the profits in many different ways. Is that clear?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I didn't do it before.
Yeah, it's very good. It saves memory. So rather than having to go to the data and populate it, you just do it in the pivot table.
What about data? Is it three column there? It's no profit there. We just create from pivot table. We're just created on pivot table, not on data.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. It's just on the pivot table. So because you have to do it on the data, you save memory. Because if you look at this data that I have, it's 9,000 rows. But if you had much more, like 100,000, it would take up a lot of memory if you had to create a new column and multiply it. So rather than doing that, you just create it on the pivot table only.
Okay, understood.
And it's very dynamic. You just use it. As you can see, the field is there. You just use it as you've been using the other fields. So now, yes, I said calculate profit by retailer and year. Okay. So now you might notice that in our data, we don't have year. But what we do have is sales date. Now the old version didn't, but the new version does. In Excel, if you've got a date column, Excel recognizes that as a date and it will change it. It will split the data for you. So you don't have to create a new column called year or a new column called month. It can split it up for you into year, month, quarters, and dates. So we want to split something by year. So, and then so we want this by year. So what we do, we've got the date. I'm going to put the date, sales date, and I'll put it in the column section. And you might notice that in here, in the column section, can you see it's got the word year? Which I only put sales date in. It's got the year. It has the quarters. It's put in, it's put in the months. And then it's got the sales date. So you can see what it's done just by putting the sales date in there. It's broken it down into some different options. So I have a choice if I want to use the year, the quarter, the month, or the actual sales date. And if you notice on the pivot table itself, you've got this plus next to the year. Basically, what that means is that you can expand it. So if I wanted to expand, let's say 2021, I click on the plus, and I can see for 2021, we have quarter 4. Then I can expand Q4 as well. And I can see that we've got December. And then I could expand December. And that gives me the information that we have for that December, which is just one date. Okay. But in this example here, we don't want, sometimes you may not actually want to see this option of this plus and minus, but I want to get rid of it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove it and just, I will only keep the year in there. Yeah, in the column section. I will remove quarters. So you click on the arrow, and you say remove field. I'm going to remove the month as well. Click on the arrow, remove field. And I'm also going to remove the dates because we don't need to remove field. So there you go. So now I've got my information by year and by, actually I want it by retailer. So just remove the region and put the retailer in the rows. So now I've got it. So now I've got my, I can see the profit by retailer and by year. Yes?
Yeah.
Have you done that before as well?
Oh yeah, many times.
Many times, okay. Okay. So have you also created pivot charts?
Yeah, I've done it.
And have you used slicers?
Uh, Slices. I think so.
Okay.
I did it. I
So
did. Yeah, when I create a table, I insert the slicers.
okay. So what I'm going to do here then, I'm going to create a chart and then later we'll do a slicer and we'll connect one slicer to both of these pivot tables. Okay. So what I'll do, I will move this pivot table as well. Okay. So as you know, to do a pivot chart, you just select the pivot table itself, click on the menu called Pivot Table Analyze, and then you click on Pivot Charts, and then you have all these options of the type of charts that you want. So I'm going to go for the column. Column makes more sense. Then we're going to just click and push that down here. And we'll just a very quick design. So we'll use that one. I'm going to remove that, and then the title, I want that to be, the title that's on this chart here. So that's linked. So now whenever I make a change to the title on this chart, the title here. So whenever I make a change to the title for this table, the title on this chart will also change. And then right now that when you look at the pivot table itself, you've got these buttons. Sometimes you may not want these buttons to show. You might want it to look like a normal graph. So what you do, you click on Pivot Chart Analyze, and then you see you've got something here that says Field Buttons. Select it, because these are called field buttons, and then you click on Hide All, and now you've got the chart without the buttons. So it just looks a bit more cleaner. So we're going to do the same here. We're going to create a chart, the pivot chart. Okay, so we've got two types of charts here. I think in this one we'll do a stack chart. So it's okay. So as you know, pivot chart is also quite straightforward. It's as straightforward as when you do a normal chart. So you click on the chart and you can choose a design that you would like. Quick layout, because I would like to have, a chart title. And the same as before. I want the chart title to be linked. That's it. Release that. Put the chart title. Okay, so as before, I'm going to remove these buttons. So that would be build buttons, hide all. And then I will just put this legend or key to be at the bottom. I go to legend and I place it at the bottom. Okay. And there we go. So those are our two charts. So now what we would like to do is to actually create a slicer for these two lovely charts. Or for all four of them actually. Okay. So to create a slicer, let's start off with this one here. So you select this pivot table and you'd go to insert, and then you've got something here that says slicer. So you click on slicer. And I would like us to be able to slice it by gender type and also by product category. So we'll have those two choices. So click on OK. And there you go. So this is our slicer. So a slicer is basically just a filter, it allows you to filter the information. So now, and we've connected these two slicers to this pivot chart here. So when we click on apparel, you see the numbers change. Yeah. And then when like for the gender type, if you click on men, so now it's just showing you the profit just for the men's clothes. If you select women, now it's showing you the profit just for the women. And because this chart underneath is connected to this pivot table, this chart also changes. As you can see the numbers have changed. Okay, so we've got this now. And so sometimes people use this as a dashboard or as a report where they actually want the like all four items to change. So when they click on men, they want it not just to change for this pivot table, but they would like it to change for this pivot table as well. Have you done it before where you've connected a slicer to more than one pivot table?
Yeah, multiple table.
Oh, you have?
We
Okay,
have to do create connection with them.
yes, exactly. So you click on that and then you look at where the pivot table is. So we're right now on the sheet called 5 new calculated. We've got pivot table 11 ticked. We're going to also tick the pivot table 12, which you can see is on the same sheet name. So we tick it and click on OK. So now they're both will change. So if you click on women, the numbers have changed for both of them. Click on men, the numbers have changed for both of them. If we want to remove the filter, because right now it's only on one, not the other, we click on the button that's got the filter with the X. So now it's showing us numbers for both. And the charts have also been changing. Well, that's it. Do you have any questions?
No, I don't think so. It was interesting. I like your teaching. It was very understanding.
Thank
It
you.
was pleasure for me to see
Oh,
what to see. Yeah.
yeah. It sounds like this level might have been slightly easy, a bit too easy.
Yeah, I think so. But I would like to repeat many things. That's why it was interesting for me.
Oh, good, good. So what I do, would you like me to email you the spreadsheet just so you can play about with it?
Spreadsheets. What
Yeah,
is?
this spreadsheet.
Uh,
I could,
what about them?
would you like me to email it to you? So then,
Okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay.
okay. Okay, so yes, so thank you for your time. If you have any questions or would like me to clarify anything, but it looks like you knew everything apart from the calculated fields.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I'd say your pivot table is quite advanced. Yeah, because there were other things that I haven't covered, but I just took the most important things, most likely um, tasks that one would do with a pivot table at intermediate level. That's why I covered this, because with the advanced, you would probably be you'd probably be connecting different data sets together now, making connections, like relationships between two data sets. But at this level, you tend to work on just one data set only. Okay, well, thank you for your time. And
Thank you
I'm
very
glad you found
much. Yeah, it was pleasure for me.
Thank you. So if you want, you could just send me a message on Meetup, your email address, and I can email you the spreadsheet.
Okay, I will do it immediately. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.